Build Your Business listeners. This is Matt Reynolds, your host for the podcast, and you are listening to what we are calling the legacy episodes. And really, these are the pre-episodes that really led to this podcast, the Build Your Business podcast. This is really my life's work and my brother's life's work in building your business. And so they were originally published in the Barbell Logic podcast as part of the Principles or Coaching Success series, but really touch on similar topics to the Build Your Business podcast: how to improve your productivity, how to set and accomplish your goals, deprioritize urgent tasks, to focus on what is most important to you, and most importantly, to become a better person and leader and business owner overall. I'm proud to bring you these podcasts. Again, many years of life's work, several years of podcasts, and several decades of business ownership. Hope you enjoy them and learn from them. You're listening to Barbell Logic, brought to you by Barbell Logic Online Coaching, where each week we take a systematic walk through strength training and the refining power of voluntary hardship. Welcome to the Barbell Logic podcast. We talk about principles that have shaped our everyday lives in positive ways, quality of life sort of issues. And today I wanted to talk about what we call the Pomodoro, which my little brother Chris introduced me to years ago. Last, we talked about the quadrants of things that are urgent and important. And we primarily use the Pomodoro, which is undistracted work, blocks of time for undistracted work. I'll let Chris introduce that, while tackling those issues that are both urgent and important. So, Chris, thanks for being on the show again. Tell me a little bit about, where did you discover this? Is old. This has been around for a while.
Yeah, it looks like it was invented or maybe first published in the late 80s by a guy named Francesco Cirillo. He's an Italian guy, which is actually where the Pomodoro phrase came from. It means a tomato. So it's like tomato timer.
Like your grandma had the old kitchen timer that was in the shape of a tomato that had sort of an equator around it, and you could twist the bottom half and the top half apart, and it would tick, 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 wah, right? Well, now we have timers on our phones, so we don't have to use these old kitchen timers. But that was originally what this was based on, was how to use a kitchen timer to work efficiently.
That's exactly right. And this was introduced to me by two colleagues at work at the same time. So I can't actually credit one individual over another. I think it was really becoming a hot topic within circles of programmers, which is my background. And it makes total sense that programmers would be some of the early people to adopt this, because you have to be in the flow state of work for a very long period of time as a programmer. We talk a little bit about context switches within the programming world, and it applies to humans, fascinatingly. So the basic idea is just, if you're working on something in programming, you have a huge amount of context in your brain. And if somebody comes up and taps you on the shoulder and asks you about something else, you have to ditch all that knowledge that's in your brain for a minute, answer their question, grab that knowledge, put it back in your brain, and get into the context. It's been estimated that costs you about 20 minutes in programming. It's that hard to get back into the flow state. And so a couple of friends of mine that worked with me mentioned this to me, and they said, you should really read up on the Pomodoro Technique. And part of this is just because productivity hacks were always very interesting to me. I always liked that. So they sent me looking into the Pomodoro. And so I found several articles on it, read through the original Pomodoro paper, which you can find online by just looking up Pomodoro Technique. The Wikipedia article is also fascinating. It's a very good source of information on the Pomodoro. But the basic concept is incredibly simple. It's just, what you do is you set a 25-minute timer. Now, the amount of time is not quite as important as the principles underneath the time. So you'll notice as you progress through doing Pomodoros, you might actually adjust the time quite a bit in various directions. But for 25 minutes, you stay absolutely dedicated to one thing that you're trying to get done. You do not do two things, and you never allow an interruption. An interruption means that the Pomodoro was failed, and you have to start it over again. And the basic idea behind this is to keep you in that state of flow and to keep you from having to do a context switch, which is incredibly expensive, especially for knowledge workers that have things in their head. They're working on trying to get something done. But I even noticed when my wife and I were remodeling a house that, spending all my time working on a particular area of the house, a context switch was also expensive. So for those of you that do more like labor style jobs, I think it's still very beneficial. The basic idea, 25 minutes, you stay absolutely focused. You do not use the restroom. You do not go get a drink. There are a million ways we distract ourselves on purpose because we're a little bit bored with what we're doing. And you cannot allow those things to happen or you will not be very efficient at the process. And then at the end of the 25 minutes, you check a checkbox off, say, I did it. You take a 5-minute break. And the 5-minute break is actually very, very important. You got to get up. That's your time to use the restroom, get a drink, grab some coffee, whatever. Maybe for me, I'd get outside and just look off a distance. I'd notice I'd get some eye strain if I was staring at my computer for too long. Whatever you need to do during that period of time, then you sit down and you start the timer again and you keep going. It's amazing how over time you can build up the ability to do more and more and more Pomodoros in a day. So a Pomodoro would be a unit of 25 minutes.
Yeah, or even 30 minutes, 25 minutes of work and 5 minutes of rest. So you introduced this to me probably a decade ago, and I started using it in everything that I did outside of those things that were important but not urgent, right? So anything in those first 3 quadrants that we talked about, I would either delegate or automate or I'd Pomodoro. And so to this day, I still do that. And so some of my tips that I use on a daily basis is, I talked about this last week, I get up really early because there are less distractions early. Pomodoros work well for me the first 2 or 3 hours I'm awake every morning. That's the best Pomodoro time I have. It's much more difficult for me to do Pomodoros at 3 o'clock in the afternoon because my phone is blowing up. Now, number 2, the best thing I can do to cut distractions is to turn off all of the notifications off of my phone and off of my computer. So I don't get notifications for emails, for texts, for Slack, which has become a huge part of this. No social media. I don't even have Facebook on my phone. No social media notifications. I have them off of my computer as well because those notifications become a massive distraction. And then for me, I always have a blank sheet of paper that's sitting on my desk that if something pops into my head, like, oh, we need to pick this up at the grocery store, I can just write whatever, cilantro, and I'm right back to work because trying to hold the idea of I need to pick up cilantro at the grocery store this afternoon actually takes up more bandwidth in my head. I want to free the bandwidth up. So it's not that you're not allowed a 3-second distraction. It's that you get that distraction on paper as fast as possible so that it doesn't have to take up bandwidth in your head. And that is how I get tons of work accomplished. Now, we've done this anytime I have the leadership team come out and we work together either here in Springfield or if we're on a business trip together, we do Pomodoros together as a team. Like we sit down at a conference table and we'll talk a little bit, do our thing. A lot of times eat breakfast, drink coffee, whatever. We're like, okay, we're going to start Pomodoros. Is everybody ready? And a lot of times we'll even go around the table really quick and we'll say, what is the thing you're working on for the next Pomodoro? So that there's some accountability there, right? So my editor-in-chief says, I'm working on this article. My VP of marketing says, this is what I'm doing, right? And we go all the way around the table. Everybody says, this is what we're doing. Okay, here we go. Start. We do the Pomodoro at 25 minutes. We take our break. 5 minutes. Everybody goes pee, gets coffee, maybe checks her text, checks her emails, whatever they need to do. And then we sit down again and say, okay, how'd it go? Do you have more left to do or are you ready to move on to the next thing?
Yeah.
And we'll knock out 4, 5, 6 Pomodoros in a row as a team. And at the end, every single time, my entire team's like, oh my God, this is amazing how much work I got done. It works every single time. The story, I wrote an article for Barbell Logic last year about this. You can go on Barbell Logic and search Pomodoro. My daughter, Kaylin's 14, very easily distracted. Most 14-year-olds are, but she's very easily distracted. And of course, we homeschool. And so she doesn't have enough work, even though we use a very tough curriculum, to work 8 or 9 hours a day. And yet I noticed she was working 8 or 9 hours a day. I was like, what's going on? And she's like, I just can't get all my work done. I was like, whoa, hold on. So of course I didn't make her get up at 4:30, but I think I set the alarm for 6:30 in the morning, had her get up at 6:30, come down in the office, and we just did Pomodoros together. And in like 3 Pomodoros, she was done with all of her work as a freshman in high school in an hour and a half. And she was like, oh my God, this is ridiculous. I'm like, no, this works. Now you can spend the rest of your day at 14 years old doing whatever you want. You want to go like play on TikTok or watch YouTube or go shopping at the mall or do whatever. You can do those things. And we don't let you do those things unless your schoolwork is done. So now she has a strategy to get her schoolwork done faster so that she can go do the things that are important to her as a 14-year-old.
Absolutely. Pomodoros are a fascinating way to get into 2 concepts that are complementary and they actually affect each other across the rest of your life. And that is the idea of how to ignore things that actually don't matter.
Yep.
And also how to really pay attention and be present to the things that you are doing. It almost forces you to do that. It's very close to what you read about, and it's popular now, but at the time that I read Pomodoros, it wasn't really a thing that people were talking about. And that is things like meditation, right? Where what you're actually doing is you're focusing on one thing, and a distraction is something that you might make note of. They even use those words, make note. Well, in Pomodoro, you used an example earlier where you keep a piece of paper there. That's actually part of the process to write down the idea so it's not trapped in your head and taking up space or looping. And the same is true in your life. When you're playing with your kids, if you are actually not there in your head, you're doing something else, you're worrying about something else, then you're not giving them your undivided attention. You're not enjoying it as much, all of those things. Pomodoros are a very interesting way to help you see how much your mind wants to avoid doing the thing it is you're trying to do, how much it will fight boredom, or even the slightest, just is looking for that dopamine hit of, getting on social media and taking a look at what's going on or whatever. Pomodoros are a structured technique to make sure that you absolutely get 25 minutes of something done.
That's right.
And it's fascinating, the more you get into it, how easy it is to do more inside of a day. I can't remember what my top number was, but it was in the upper 20s of the number of consistent Pomodoros I could pull off.
When you were programming like crazy, you would say you could do 8 hours of Pomodoros, which would be 16 Pomodoros.
Yeah, it took years to get to the point where I was capable of doing that.
And I can't do that. That's more even than I can do, certainly in just about a row. By the way, one of the techniques for Pomodoros for most people is after they do 3 or 4 of these, they need to take a longer break. 5-minute break is not enough for most people. They'll need to take a 30-minute break, an hour break, go walk, do something active, get some blood flow. It's a really good time to work out, things like that. So we talked about the strategies for distraction to make sure the notifications are off your phones, computers, etc. We talked about for us finding times that are harder for people to distract you, which for us is early in the morning, but that's not what it would be for everybody. But find those times that there's less chance of being distracted. I always try to go in a private room when I do this stuff. Like people that work in coffee shops, I don't understand how they do that because there's too much distraction for me. Now, I've had to do it before. I've had to do it at airport lounges and on airplanes. And to me, that's where earphones, like noise canceling headphones, work really, really well. And of course, your eyes are focused on a screen, but the more you have things going in front of your face and distracting your eyesight, that is a potential problem. And so I try to really focus in on my eyes see this, my ears hear this. There are notifications popping up on my phone or computer. My family's sleeping, so there's no like auditory distractions, and it really helps.
I have a trick to the sound piece of that too that I used very frequently when I was in a chaotic situation. I traveled a lot while I was programming also. And, airplanes or airports especially are just total chaos, right?
Right.
And so you actually wrote a paper on this, and I was in agreement. Your sound canceling headphones that go over your ears are extremely valuable. But there's another trick to that, which is if you take a foam earplug and you put it in your ears, and then you take sound canceling headphones and put it over your ears and play white noise, the world goes away. I mean, it is absolutely fantastic how much, you'll look around and you don't know what's going on outside in terms of sound.
Right.
So if you're someone, I am particularly distracted by sound. I'm super sound sensitive.
Me too.
Visually, not so much. I can block out things visually, but sound just affects me terribly. If you're in a similar boat, buy a giant box of those foam earplugs. They don't go bad. And then get some over your ear sound canceling headphones, play white noise in it, and you'll notice that the world falls away.
The last point I want to make here is that we try to get rid of the things in our life as much as possible that are not urgent, not important. We try to delegate or automate, for the most part, the things that are urgent but not important. And for the things that I cannot delegate and still have to do, then I use Pomodoros for those. I use Pomodoros primarily for that third quadrant of things that are urgent and important. And I very rarely use Pomodoros for the final quadrant. And I'll put the caveat with this. If it has to do with relationships, I would never Pomodoro. Like, I don't want efficiency of time when it comes time to going on a date with my wife or playing with my kids. But you have noted, and it's true, I do like efficiency of time for things like reading, for things like working out. I like timed rest periods we've all seen people who work out and they take 3 hours to do a workout because they just lollygag the whole time. Like that's a waste of time to spend 3 hours on a workout. If your workout takes longer than 90 minutes, especially if you're if you're not an advanced lifter, it shouldn't take longer than an hour. But if it takes longer than 90 minutes, you're lollygagging. And you've talked about using Pomodoros for things like reading books. Like, books are important to you. And so you try to give your reading 25 minutes of undistracted time so that your mind can really hone in and focus on the thing you're reading.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I mean, I think there are other advantages too on the things that are not relationship oriented. And I agree with you wholeheartedly on the relationship side. Dedicate your time to those people and don't time it. When it comes to reading, what's interesting is if you time it, you can also track some things. So I'm a little bit of a data geek, and most people aren't. But if you are, one thing you'll notice is you've got a consistent time factor. You can figure out how many pages you normally read inside that period of time. And it's easy for you to project out how long it's going to take you to complete a book or 50 books, however many you're doing. So there are advantages in there of running those. And then additionally, just keeping the distractions out. If I'm going to go through a book and somebody interrupts me in the middle of my 25-minute reading period, normally I'll just say, you just hang tight until I'm done with this section and I'll get with you in a few minutes. And that allows me to stay head down on the reading that I want to get done because it's very important to me in what I do right now.
Awesome. So takeaway there is everybody that's listening to this has things that they know they need to do. Often those things are things you don't really want to do that much, but you need to get them done. They're both urgent and important. A Pomodoro is a great strategy to attack that, to get it done as quickly as possible so that it opens up your schedule to do more of the things and be present for the things that are important, but not so urgent. So next time you get a chance, like tomorrow morning, do some Pomodoros and see how fast you get this work knocked out. Thank you for listening again. This has been another episode of Barbell Logic Podcast, and we'll see you tomorrow morning.